Noblesse oblige, I look forward to continued service as a savior. Hello and welcome to Shred Cels episode 53. I'm your host, Alex Schmitz, and with me here today is Peter Frank.
Hello there.
And Andrew Gleason.
Good job, Savior. We're counting on you.
That's right.
Not you, though. You're bad at it.
What, me?
No, him.
Oh, okay.
We're just, whoever's listening.
John over there.
But that other one that's listening.
Okay.
He's good. You can pick. You can sort that amongst yourselves.
God damn it, man. Put your pants back on.
Yes, for those of you who are listening to us for the first time, you'd be interested to hear that we are part of Tech Heads, which is part of AVW Productions, a media production organization here at Ohio University. We are Tech Heads, do all sorts of cool things with video games, movies, music, anime. You know, we got a blog, we've got a YouTube page, you know, we do podcasts on iTunes, so we're pretty awesome. But we're the anime podcast, Shred Cels, and we're here today to talk about the 2009 show Eden of the East and its two movies, King of Eden and Paradise Lost. But before we dive into those, we're going to talk about some news and the animation we've watched since last time. So it's been it's been about a month or so since we've done a podcast. So there's actually been a few interesting pieces of news over that time. Have you guys been seeing any of the dub clips from Attack on Titan that Funimation's been releasing on their YouTube page?
I have not.
Okay.
No, I'd really rather just wait for it all to be out in a, unified format. Just...
I see. Well, they've been releasing clips of it and been announcing whose cast is who. Basically, they've announced everyone except for Eren, who they're saving for this convention.
Fair enough.
But the DVDs and Blu-rays are coming out June 3rd, and the hope is that that maybe it gets picked up by Toonami, and gets put on there because that would do so well on that block. I feel like
it's back, and yet I still never watch it. I feel bad.
You should feel bad. It's even got a brand new show, Space Dandy, on it.
You should watch Space Dandy.
It's ridiculous.
You are bad, and you should feel bad. I don't know.
You don't watch it either.
I know I don't watch either, but I can still claim that. I mean, it's an accurate claim.
I am.
You can just be a hypocrite, basically. Also, and non-anime related news, but animation news, Pixar's announced they're going to be making an Incredibles 2 and a Cars 3.
Why are they making more cars?
Because it sells a lot.
Why?
But it makes me sad on my sad
But they could do so
places.
much better. Anything, like an Incredibles 2 would be fine.
No, Incredibles 2, they even ended it with the intention of making another one.
Well, I don't know. I feel like it was standalone enough. It could have been by
it
itself.
was
literally
standalone enough,
anything else.
but it could have
any
been.
any of their other properties that aren't this.
I don't know. I like Cars more than A Bug's Life.
I mean, they're making planes too.
Well, no, that's Disney. That's not Pixar. That's not solely their name.
It's still being made.
I know, but
That's also wrong.
and it's not even not the Disney studio animated studio that made Frozen. It's like their TV studio, like the studio that makes the crappy movies. Basically,
It's about firefighting planes.
Yeah. No, let's not talk about that. But yeah, so Cars 3 is sort of meh. Since Cars 2, I've heard is terrible. I didn't actually watch it. But Cars 1 was actually pretty good. And Incredibles 2 is being written by Brad Bird. We're not sure if he's directing it, but hopefully he's involved because he's kind of important. Durarara is getting a second season. I have not watched that show, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. And written by the same guy who did Baccano, the light novels, the original creator. So that's cool for fans of that series. I do believe it's being done by it's either being done by a different animation studio or dubbed by a different one. I forget which it was. But there's that. And I'm not particularly interested in this, but there is a new Sailor Moon anime coming out in July called Sailor Moon Crystal. So that's kind of a big deal for those who are fans of the Sailor Moon franchise. I believe it's not a remake of the original show, but more of they're redoing the original manga, so it's going to be the same story, but more true to the manga, I think, than the original TV anime was. So,
Woot woot.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. My sisters really love Sailor Moon, so they might enjoy that. And this one got me excited. Nice America is the company that releases. It's a dubbing company, here in America, or licensing company, I guess you could say, that releases U.S. anime. And they did Toradora, and as well as several other shows over the years. And they announced recently that they are actually dubbing Toradora, even though that show is several years old at this point. They're going back and dubbing it, which hopefully means that because they've always released all their shows subbed, not dubbed, I guess to save on money basically. So if this Toradora dub goes well, then hopefully they'll do more dub releases in the future.
So buy 7 copies.
I don't know if I'll be doing that because I feel bad because I already have bought the series with their old release, like with the subtitles. So it's like, is it really worth like the $80 to buy the whole series again dubbed? It's like, I don't know. But we'll see. I'm looking forward. I will at least watch the series again just to see it dubbed, just to hear the voices, how they do it. Because Toradora is a really fun show and has a great Japanese cast. And then the Studio Ghibli movie Princess Kaguya, which was directed by Isao Takahata, was the one that came out in Japan in 2013 alongside The Wind Rises, is being released by G Kids, which is some company here in America that basically releases the Studio Ghibli films that Disney doesn't pick up. Like in 2012, From Up on Poppy Hill was released by G Kids because Disney didn't license it. So it's good to hear that Princess Kaguya is coming over. You know, it's not one I don't think it's going to be great just looking at the story and the animation style, but it's Studio Ghibli, so I will definitely watch it when it comes out. Okay, so now we talk about the animation we've watched since last time. For myself, like I said, it's been a while since we did a podcast. We haven't done one since spring break. Yeah, it was spring break. Yeah, because over spring break I watched and the entirety of it's about a 50 episodes or so, I think, of an anime called Nodame Cantabile. I think that's how you pronounce it. A fun show. If anyone likes classical music, I highly recommend that show because it's basically just all about this boy and this girl who are like going to college in a music school, and like the one guy like plays piano really well but wants to be a conductor, and it's like about him, accomplishing his dream of conducting, and she's like a really eccentric but really talented piano student. It's about the two of them, like a rom-com sort of thing, because they fall in love, of course, but also focuses a lot on the music and has like these cool scenes of them playing the music or conducting, and has a really good like classical music score if you like that sort of thing. So that was a fun show I watched. Then a group of us went and saw The Wind Rises at the Athena here in Athens, Ohio.
We can't talk about that, though, because that's going to be a podcast.
It's going to be a podcast for next week, but I think we can all say, if any of you out there are listening, it's very good, deserving of Miyazaki's last movie. So definitely go see it if you can.
And let's hope that he is just lying and he's going to make more.
We'll see. I will be happy to hear if he does, because even though I'll be a little frustrated that he broke his word again, but if he makes more movies, I'm fine with that because he's amazing.
Going to complain about him doing more stuff. I mean,
yeah, I don't think anyone's complaining.
No, nobody's complaining.
And then just keeping up with the things I've been watching. Kill la Kill. I haven't seen the episode for today, but it's just continued to be awesome.
The best.
Over the recent episodes.
Though we're entering the end. We're at the end game now, so
it's true. It's both awesome and sad because it's like, okay, we're getting to the epic conclusion, but then it's like, it's going to be over in 2 weeks.
What if the ending's not good?
No, don't say that.
Well, actually,
it's going to be amazing. It's
not going to be end 2 weeks. It's going to be end like next week.
Well, next week, right?
Next week is going to be the last episode.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do a podcast on it in 2 weeks, hopefully.
Yeah.
Because we will talk all about it then.
Well, so many people have been watching that.
Yeah. And so all my other shows, Nagi no Asakara, there's some of these shows like started up in the winter season and are like 25 episode shows, so they're like reaching their halfway points, like Space Dandy, but most of them are wrapping up. So like Nagi no Asakura is getting near its Golden Time got really dramatic and dark in its most recent episodes. Samurai Flamenco as well. After this crazy thing happened like 2 episodes ago, I was like, okay, where's the show going to go? And it's actually going in a really interesting dark direction. For you guys, I know you haven't caught up with it yet, but there's a hint of what's to come later in the very first episode of the show. So it'll be fun to, when the show is done, if they do stuff like that, to sort of go back and rewatch for the hints they have throughout it. Nobunaga the Fool, Wizard Barristers is actually starting to get pretty dramatic and interesting. Space Dandy had a bizarre episode last week, but
that was all of their episodes.
Yeah, some are more bizarre than others, It's sort of an up and down thing with Space Dandy. You never know what you're going to get, which is kind of cool. Matt actually told me that it's Space Dandy is actually, each episode is directed by someone else. So there's like a new director every week. So it really is trying to be like this artistic thing. And most of the show is done with 2D hand-drawn animation. I did also see something on Tumblr showing a picture of one of the guys from Studio Trigger. Apparently all of the backgrounds in Kill la Kill are painted by hand. So it showed like pictures of those like,
cool.
backgrounds. And it's like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. So that's what I've been watching. Peter, how about you?
I watched Kill la Kill as well. I've also been. I also watched The Wind Rises. We watched a fair bit of Archer, the season that just got put up on Netflix. I think that's 4. It's funny as heck. I also saw the Peabody and Sherman movie, a cute kids movie that's tolerable. I mean, it's nothing special, but I mean, if you need to take a child to a movie, you won't bleed from seeing it.
It's not that bad.
And then the Lego movie, which is, just the best sort of
The Lego movie is in fact the best.
I really want to see it. I still have not gotten a chance.
So
fantastic.
awesome.
It's smart.
Everything is awesome.
No, that's the song. That's why I keep saying this. This is just awesome because everything is awesome.
With the Lego movie, it is effortlessly capable of being entertaining to an adult and a child at the same time. Whereas Peabody and Sherman does the classic of, slipping in some dirty jokes or some, subliminal jokes that a child's not going to get, but the adults will, so they can get something out of the movie. And it does a very good job of it, but Lego movie just does it so effortlessly. It's not hiding it. It's just there, and everyone can understand and appreciate it.
Yeah. Just a quick question: did either of you guys see the trailer for the Peanuts movie that they released the other day?
No, I haven't.
No.
It's actually because it's a 3D CGI
Heresy.
movie, but
Yeah, no, I was about to say, are
Heresy.
they changing the art style?
well, that's what's cool about it. It's like
Heresy.
it's CGI, but it's got like a sort of hand drawn like look to it. Like I actually liked it. So I'll show it to you guys
We'll
after the
have
podcast.
to watch it, but that is sounding an awful lot like trying to make 3-dimensional South Park characters.
That is sounding an awful lot like
No,
Heresy.
it's not that type of 3D animation. It's like, did you guys see the Paperman short that Pixar made? I think it was before Wreck-It Ralph. It's not in that style necessarily, but think of it how it makes CGI look 2D with like the pencil-y outlines and stuff. It's something similar to that.
Heresy.
So
I'll give it a
there's that.
shot,
Heresy.
Okay.
but maybe it's gonna suck.
it is I know it is at least co-written by like Charles Schultz's son. So there's like at least some connection there, which is promising. Anything else?
Slightly less heretical,
Not really.
but still heresy.
Watch Archer. Maybe watch Peabody and Sherman. If you don't see The Wind Rises, you're a bad person and you're watching the wrong podcast. Because if you're watching this podcast, you should like The Wind Rises.
Are you watching any podcast?
Well, you're watching something. Shut up. You can see sound.
Andrew.
All right. So other than Kill la Kill, Wind Rises, things we already talked about, Archer, Lego movie. Things we already talked. Other than that, I watched a show that was on Netflix because I was bored on spring break, and it's called Legend of the Legendary Heroes.
That's right. You're telling me about
I
this.
did watch this. See, I watched the thing, and this is a thing that Alex hasn't seen, so suck it.
That might just mean it's bad.
Shh. No, I like it so far.
So far, how long is it? Like 26 episodes?
22. Okay. Or some such like that. I don't remember. I got like 6 episodes in. I was interested, but the problem with that is I don't know if I'm going to finish it now that Star Wars: The Clone Wars is on Netflix. And I think I'm just going to end up watching that for like ever.
Yeah, we got 6 seasons. To go
I do have
through.
6 seasons of that, so Star Wars kind of overrides everything.
Yeah.
So pretty much, sorry viewers, listeners, if you ever hear me talking about what was the animation you watched this, but probably just going to be the Clone Wars. I mean,
Nothing wrong with that. It's really good.
it's just going to be like I'm going to start that soon, and then I'm just going to keep watching that. Like as I have like I'll just have that on in the background while I do stuff. And
Yeah. Sounds
Every
good.
now and then you'll yell obscenities at the screen.
yes, when they defile Star Wars canon.
I see.
Aaron was telling me that they have apparently defiled Star Wars canon at some points in times, and that bothers me.
They do some interesting things. Like you saw that one episode from the Mortis trilogy.
Well, that was fine.
But then they like wake up and it was like all a dream,
Yeah,
so
that
like,
was-
it's like, did it happen? Did it really
I
happen?
don't care.
It's-
But I don't care. But they wasted that name. That's a good name for a Sith Lord.
oh,
Darth Mortis?
Darth
Darth
Mortis.
No. Why? That's not a good name. That's just Darth Death.
Yes.
That's not. No.
Yes.
Try and be at least a little subtle.
There's no subtlety with the Sith. They're aware of who they are.
Well, Count Dooku is called Darth Tyrannus.
Darth
so
Tyrannus,
they're
Darth
not.
Sidious, Darth Vader's kind of ambiguous. Darth Maul, Darth Bane. Do I have to keep going? Darth Revan,
Darth
Malik.
Undeadu.
I did do. All right. So now we'll move on to the main topic for this week, which, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is Eden of the East. Interestingly, this series is created, written, and directed by one guy. It's sort of this guy's brainchild, I think. Kenji Kamiyama. So it's an original anime, which is kind of a unique thing. He directed Ghost in the Shell standalone complex and helped with animation on Jinro, the Wolf Brigade, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Akira. So he's got a pretty good track record under his belt. This show was made by Production IG, which explains why the animation looks really good throughout this show, especially the backgrounds, really detailed, in my opinion. So I suppose we can start by talking about the first episode because this show has a really intriguing premise and really throws you right into the middle of things.
It does have that.
It was a great idea. I think they came at it a bit the wrong way, but I mean, it was still a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, what were you guys' impressions in the first episode when Takizawa shows up, naked with the white scribbly censor, holding a gun in front of the White House?
I was confused. I'm like, all right, fine.
His loins must be made of gold because every time he shows someone his genitals, they just get happy and give him what he wants. Like, oh, you came up, lifted a little coat, and showed me your junk. Okay, I think I'll give you my pants now. I'll just take my pants off, give them to you, and then walk away. I'm a businessman in a suit.
I think did he just talk with the guy? I don't know if he showed him.
He showed him.
Did he?
Just lifted up. It's like, hey, sup, I'm not wearing any pants. See?
He did do it with the one police officer in that episode. No, that's not me. See?
I
don't know.
She just smiles.
Does this help
She just
me
smiles.
identify?
Like, yeah, sure.
Thank God it was a cold day.
Yeah,
There was some shrinkage involved.
Indeed.
No, I don't think it's ever really explained as to why he was naked and
I think
woke
he just
up
likes
in
being
DC.
naked.
No, it isn't explained why he was naked. It is. I had actually watched the show several months ago, maybe even a year ago. I don't even know. And I rewatched it for this podcast, and watching it, knowing what was in the ending, I noticed some clever things that they did throughout. Like in that first episode, he holds the phone to his ear, and you hear that noise that you hear in Paradise Lost, when the memory erasing noise basically, and he puts down his phone and looks startled, sees the gun in his hand and goes and talks to the police officers. So it's sort of like he literally had his memories erased right then and there. Why he had a gun or was naked, I don't know.
It was never explained.
I think original him just screwing with future him.
Could be. And one thing I will say about the animation of the show, I quite like it's something, I don't know how to explain it. It's something subtle, because the animation isn't radically, different. It just sort of has a nice realistic look. But the character designs, I think, are really nice because they make the characters look distinctive. You can recognize their faces, which is a problem a lot of anime have.
I like how they do noses. Well, they do noses very distinctly. They just shadow the bridge, which makes it look like everyone's wearing one of those, I just broke my nose Band-Aids or I snore so I wear breathe right strips. But there's nothing else to indicate a nose. So it's just strip.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's interesting. I found it to be distracting in certain scenes with the shadow on their
I
face.
agree, because there's some scenes where they have real close-ups on their face, and they have that low bridge. I'm like, God damn it.
So I kept on thinking that they had glasses or their hair was casting a shadow or why is that there, sort of thing. But another thing I like about the animation show is whenever they do something funny and make the characters go all chibi, they do this thing with their eyes where they make them all black and white and really
just
scribbly.
the black and white circles.
Yeah, I really
back to the manga style.
I really like that look that they do. So just in general, the animation is quite good in the show. They do use you can see them use 3D quite a bit, with the vehicles and in crowd shots. They'll turn all the background characters into 3D models, which can look a little off-putting. But overall, I can't really complain about the animation in this show.
It's a distinctive one. I enjoyed it, but I kind of wish they improved it a bit on the movies.
Yeah, the movies really feel more like
just
extended episodes of the TV show
I feel like
than anything else.
They were broken down into episodes. They would have been better.
I could see that being applied to the first movie because
definitely
it doesn't
the first movie.
because it doesn't conclude anything. But the second one,
the second movie could stay a movie. The first movie really could have just been, if they had broken it down right and changed the writing a bit, I feel like it could have just been episodes, and it would have been better suited to it.
it could have been, yeah. Another question that is raised in the first episode that's never answered is why Takizawa has all those guns in his apartment. They're in Washington D.C.
Well, because they imply that he's like, am I a terrorist? Am I really
he
a
thinks
terrorist?
he's a terrorist.
He has all those passports, and then he has all those guns. He's like Jason Bourne. He makes the Jason
they
Bourne
did
reference, and
He does, and they did explain the passports. They said that he used those to go to collect all the neats, the 20,000 neats, or something to that effect.
But they never explain why was he in why is all that stuff in DC? Why does he have all these guns?
Right, the guns.
Why the White House? I seriously think past him, it just was like, okay, Juiz, I want you to set up, a safe place for me to start, but I also want you to screw with future me's head and just make him think I'm crazy. Don't let him understand anything that's going on. Just give me a gun. I don't know why I need a gun. Just give it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think the first episode does a great job of just throwing you in the middle of this, and he's completely clueless about who he is, and so are you, so it really helps you relate to him, and it's all their first interactions. It's all based off of circumstance because it's he's just standing there naked to start with, and then later she gives him her coat. And then it turns out she had her wallet or something or her phone in
passport.
there. Passport, yeah. And so she has to go find him, and then gets dragged into all of his insanity, basically. And I think right at the end of that episode is where he's looking at a thing about the missile attacks, in Japan that had just happened, and you hear of Careless Monday, being referenced, and that's the first time you're getting this sort of hint, there's this is sort of because it's set. The series was released in 2009, but it is set in 2011. If you look at the dates in the show, so it's a near future sort of thing for the time that the show was released, which is kind of interesting.
In the not too distant future of 2011.
2011. That is now 3 years old.
Well, I mean,
As it turns out,
we could
Japan
really
was
just
never
say it's in
terrorist attack.
2016, and there would be no great difference. I mean, we might have self-tying shoes by then, but outside of that, I don't think we're going to be that much
Self-tying
improved.
shoes.
Self-tying shoes.
I
That's
just need
But
self-drying
where are my
vests
hoverboards and my
hoverboards.
flying cars?
Well,
you've
self-drying clothing is
disappointed
my
me.
main goal.
Science, I'm disappointed. Anyway,
I'm very disappointed.
I am.
Yeah, so I don't know. I suppose we could get into talking about some of the characters because I think Takizawa definitely, understandably, since he's the protagonist, stands out as by far the best character in the cast, the most interesting and dynamic. Sounds like you disagree, Pete.
I like Takizawa. He's a very likable character because he takes things very calmly and he doesn't freak out about things. But sometimes that kind of hurts because, I'd like to see him react straight. He's told at one point, yeah, you just, shipped off a bunch of guys and you just kidnapped all these people. And he just oh, okay, yeah. And he doesn't react very much. You rarely get to see inside his head and, you never see his thought process or see him struggle with what's going on. He's just very carefree and chill the entire time, no matter what the situation.
To be fair, it is a show where we never see anyone's inner thoughts. It's never. Well, I guess Saki narrates at some points, so you get
You never
that.
see people's inner thoughts, but I don't know. I would have liked him to show at least a bit more personality outside of being a friendly, calm guy is fine, but some of those situations really would have deserved reaction.
Although I was paying attention to that because you guys had referenced it, and in general, he is a very level-headed person. That's part of what makes him cool, I think. But he does freak out at several points. There was one scene where he was screaming about the game and Mr. Outside and was gonna throw his phone over this fence, and then thought better of it and was juggling it in his hands, and when bad things happen, he still gasps or says, I want to punch that bastard Mr. Outside, in the face or all this stuff, So he does show anger, he does get upset at certain points.
At certain points, yeah, but I feel like there are a lot of points where he doesn't, and it's really noticeable. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're told that you kidnapped all these people. You're talking to a serial killer who supposedly has your best friend, and you're just I'm going to show you the true love of a Johnny. And no, you should probably get your friend out of there.
Yeah, well, except his strategy actually worked in that case because she's like,
kinda.
oh, a man who's nice to me. I like this.
A man that's not Satan? What
Yeah.
is this?
What is this? Indeed. Because we have him, I almost sort of compared him to Spike Spiegel a little, like from Cowboy Bebop, which I guess is lost on you guys
Yeah,
if you haven't
sorry.
seen it. But he's like a direct quote from the show is from Spike is whatever happens, happens. So he has this very like sort of, chill way of living most of the time. And Takizawa is sort of similar, not badass in the way Spike is. Although once again, I do remember in like some of his delusions, like there was that one where he falls down like from that bridge and like all the gray like alien looking
so
guys, start coming up to him. And I think they're supposed to represent the Neats because he like starts
Yeah, I
calling them
definitely
by
agree.
name.
Well,
And then
he calls them Johnnies, and he also
I think I'll have to go back because I swear he doesn't just say Johnny's though. He was like, "Oh, hey Johnny, Fred, blah."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember
He
that.
had a couple names, and then they start like attacking him, and he starts screaming at him, and is like, "You goddamn bastards!"
Yeah.
So there are some times where he like freaks out, but they are.
it was inconsistent.
Well, I don't know. Inconsistent makes it sound like it was like a writing flaw, and I don't think
I
it's
feel
that.
that it is.
Really.
I mean, you're told that you kidnapped 2,000 people who like are very similar to you and your friend base that you've just started building, and like you have no idea where they are. And you're talking to a person who says, "Yeah, I've made it my entire goal to track down the person that shipped off all of these people." Oh, by the way, that's you. And neither of them like freak out or do
Wait,
anything.
Are you
about
talking
it.
about when he's talking to Panties about
Yes.
it? Well, at that point in the show, he already he kind of knew that he did
He
the thing
kind
with
of-
the 20,000 Neats, so it wasn't a surprise to him.
He still could have been like he hadn't had it like really confirmed. And honestly, Panties had been hunting this guy down for forever. And he's like, "Oh yeah, and by the way, you're the guy I've been hunting down. I'm gonna keep digging through these files now."
Yeah, well, I don't know. Because I'm pretty sure, like, it's the 20,000 Neats thing is mentioned pretty early on. And, like, I want to say it's the Kondo, I think the inspector maybe who tells him, like, you're the guy, you're the one who kidnapped those 20,000 Neats. Like when he finds the "I'll kill you for sure" Akira Takizawa, written on the wall, in the mall that he owns. He like gasps at that. He's like, "Oh shit, maybe I did do this." So it's like when he has the initial revelation, he does sort of be like, "Oh God," he is sort of upset about it. But later on, like he already kind of knew, at least suspected that it was probably the case.
As I recall, he sees that note before he's talked to the police officer about all of this. And he's just like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" And he's thinking more and more, am I a terrorist? Because, he woke up with all of those guns. But you are right. The police officer does at some point tell him, and then he meets one of the Neats who
Right.
tells him. So you do have a point there. We should probably tell the viewers what Neats are, because I went through like more than half of the show not
went
knowing
through
what
the
that
entire
was
show.
or what they were
I
saying.
don't know what that meant.
And we ended up like putting on subtitles
Googled
and then
it.
Googling it.
Yeah. It's an acronym. It's like
Not employed, educating, or something else.
yeah, not employed, educating, or training, maybe
Training might be
something
it.
like that.
Something like that.
Basically,
The concept is that you're just not doing anything for society outside of using your
Yeah.
parents' money.
the other term for it that's used in Welcome to the NHK an anime is, or in several other anime actually, is hikikomori. It's basically the same thing. It's basically this whole thing of Japanese people who, stay at home, live with their parents, don't contribute to society, basically. And that is going into that. That's probably my favorite aspect of this series is
a
the
really
way
interesting thing.
it gets into not just the needs, but just the fact that it's a modern anime set in modern day, really focused on these societal issues in the real world, and it delves into them, like conspiracy theories, the overworking practices, of Japanese companies, how the youth is being oppressed by, the older, richer, businessmen, the whole thing with the Neats.
While at the same time, a lot of the youth just like aren't doing anything, which
Right. So, so it gets into some very interesting commentary, about Japan. And obviously it doesn't hit us as hard because it's about Japan, not about America, but it still is interesting concepts, and some of them can be universally applied.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly.
it was originally like a British term, correct?
Yes, it was. It was the term "neat" originated in Britain. It was,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Wikipedia
Wikipedia.
told me that. But my biggest problem with the Neat's plotline is A, doesn't really go anywhere extreme, and B, one of them, because he meets one.
Right.
Like walking around. But nobody knew what happened to the 20,000 people that just kind of went missing and nobody ever really looked into it. And like that, because they kept referencing, like, oh, we don't know what happened to those 20,000 people just kind of up and disappeared. And then he meets one. Wouldn't that
In
one
society.
just
Yeah.
kind of like be like, hey, I was with the other 20,000 people.
Right.
I'm going to tell you where we
he
went.
told them that they went to that you sent us to Dubai, and we had to do all this stuff there, but it all turned out well in the end. So I guess it was okay. So it makes me feel like maybe some of the Neats must have left Dubai, because he said he found someone and got married there. So maybe he came back to Japan after that, and some of them stayed and came back in those shipping containers in the 10th episode.
I guess that's kind of reasonable, but I mean, at that point, when okay, so this guy who's relying entirely on his family to survive disappears. So his family is clearly important, tightly tied to him, and then he just shows up again. And even they don't say anything. They don't talk to the police. The police
police,
doesn't
the media.
notice that the guy who disappeared amongst a lot of other people is just back now.
20,000
Yeah,
people.
I did see someone say that until the movies, it seems like the police is pretty absent from the show, which is actually kind of true.
Oh yeah,
Something that you could criticize it for, I suppose. What do you guys think about Saki as a character? Because we get introduced to her in the first episode, and getting more of her backstory, in the second episode, when she's talking with him while they're waiting for the ferry, about her whole past. And it always sort of seemed to be implied to me that she kind of had a thing for
she says it at one point.
for her
Brother-in-law.
sisters, her brother-in-law, which is a little
little weird.
okay.
No, but that's an interesting character trait, and
It is,
but
but they never
actually
really-
like Saki a lot. They don't do a lot with that, but
Yeah, they don't really go into that too much after that episode because she falls in love with Takizawa. So
and that was a weird romance because it seemed like they were both really into each other, but they weren't doing a whole lot to make that a thing that was happening. So it seemed like they were both just sort of running around in circles.
yeah, well, it's Eden of the East is definitely a plotty show more than it is a character show, or a romance show or anything like that. So that's the main focus. That's the main intriguing element. And they do, for as little screen time as they really, or as little as they focus on the romance, they do manage to make it, relatively believable.
By the end, I was shipping it pretty early, and to be honest, because I thought Saki was cute and she was a very friendly, driven individual, and I just liked her character.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
No, I shipped them pretty early on, but it was clearly not the focus of the show.
No.
It's weird because her and almost the rest of the supporting cast was based on her
Oh, yeah.
and her relationship to them. And since the relationship of her and him were never in the forefront, and subsequently the relationship with the supporting cast and him was never in the forefront because he was always kind of running around doing stuff, and they were always just kind of reacting to the things he did and sometimes helping him. But
there was a spot in the middle of the show where he was talking to them about funding Eden of the East. They directly interacted with them, but definitely
After
near
that-
the end of the show, he's off, physically somewhere completely different than they are, doing something else, related to
which
Cels.
kind of split the plot in half. But his stuff was really interesting, and their stuff was kind of less interesting because, like I said, they were just kind of reacting to whatever he was doing. So
I found it really interesting when they first. I can't remember the guy's name who had a crush on Saki.
Osagi.
that
I
guy,
have all the names
that guy,
written down.
who I hate because he has those little blush marks internally on his face, even on scenes where he really should just not have those.
I will agree.
Guys
That
wearing
was
makeup.
That was one thing that did kind of bother me. The fact that he always had it.
It was a little weird, yeah.
A little weird.
So Osagi at one point goes to the mall that the guy he lives, and he sees the note and he starts connecting the dots, which I thought was cool. And then he starts talking to them, and it's actually, I think, a really cool part where they're all terrified because they think that their two best friends are just hanging out with a serial killer, like a mass murderer. and they're going crazy with like, he seems so nice. How can this be possible? And he's trying to fund us. Why is he trying to fund us? What are we being dragged into? And I thought that was a cool part.
Yeah, it seems like most of the stuff where it would like focus on the Eden of the East characters was them trying to uncover stuff about his past, and like sort of doubting him, because Hirasawa, who's the leader of Eden of the East, was always a little like, like this is too good to be true sort of thing.
And I appreciate that. It shows that they are people capable of thought, which a lot of anime characters aren't.
Yeah.
Like, so many characters just lack any form of pattern recognition.
And I will say with the rest, the supporting cast, the Eden of the East, they get better in the movies because they actually have more of a actual like role in the plot in the movies, I think, than they did in the TV show. And none of them are bad characters in any way, but none of them are particularly good either.
A lot of them could use some fleshing out, and like even at the end of the movies, there are a couple that are just like, oh, you had a scene where you were kind of cool, but
by
like,
the end,
why does the random old lady who's for some reason hanging out with all of the neats know how to drive a truck? Like,
oh, well, she's his Hirasawa's older sister, I think. They
That's
apparently
a detail I missed.
Apparently, they call her sis throughout the whole show. They never call her by her real name, so we don't actually know what her real name is.
Fair. I didn't catch that detail.
Yeah, she looked over their paperwork, like the paperwork that Takizawa gave to them. So I feel like she's like one of the business legal side of the business, something like that.
My main point is, though, there are a couple characters that really just didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah.
Even with what they all ended up doing something by the end of the last movie. There were some did more than others.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the case. And I suppose they could have given time to develop them and flesh them out as characters, but when you have 11 episodes, you really don't have the time to do
and
that.
they were doing a really ambitious like plot theory.
yes, there was a lot going on, and I think they were more focused on developing all the Cels as people and focusing on that section.
Yeah.
But then I was kind of wondering, like, well, then why have this many supporting characters? Couldn't you have cut like at least 2 of them out and then just devoted all that extra supporting time to like 1 or 2
Well,
people?
but
And just make
it was
the
more
supporting cast members.
it was more
fleshed out.
to Eden of the East as a group, not the individual characters. Like I don't know if taking out the sister and let's say Kasuga, who's the bigger guy in the group,
and combining their character traits with another character that already exists.
right? But what I'm saying though is would eliminating the 2 of them like from the group and just making like the Eden of the East like the 4, what would that be? Hirasawa, Saki, Michan. Yeah, so making those 3 instead of a 5-man group, would doing that have actually saved them any screen time? Like actually, done anything to reduce time since they didn't actually do that much in the show? Eliminating them wouldn't have changed the length of those scenes by too much, probably.
I feel like they could have done a bit more character. Like, I just feel like, say you take all of the things that Osig, the Sis did, and you just give all of those parts to Mitan, and then suddenly Mitan is doing more things, and she seems like more of a fleshed out
So
character.
Mitan would drive the giant truck.
That would be adorable. She need like a booster seat.
It would not work at all. But
Don't question my logic.
okay.
It's an example, but yeah, that would be my thinking.
Yeah, that's a good thought. One thing I will say, I feel like Eden of the East is definitely a kind of Western influence show. Like the Bourne comment. This whole like death game sort of thing seems to be. It just seems like a show that a Westerner would enjoy. Just the whole concept of Eden of the East in the more realistic setting. It's a bit different from most typical anime.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of Saw, though, and isn't Saw Eastern influenced?
I don't know, honestly. I haven't seen
I believe
Saw.
it is, but I'm not positive.
And
but,
and I also just got that from like I get the feeling this Kenji guy, Kenji Kamiyama, must like certain things from the West because he had this thing with how Takizawa loved these movies, especially
That was fun.
these American ones, So that was a cool reference. And I liked how he, could remember all these details about movies, but nothing about himself, and made for this nice contrast in his character.
That's probably what would happen to me if I were got amnesia. I would remember movies, but I just wouldn't remember anything else. Mm-hmm. Things that are really
Blind
important.
rage in regards to Justin Bieber, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, just
The important things.
I see the Green Lantern movie. It fills me with anger.
Just indescribable rage. But I feel like the first few episodes of the show doing a really good job as far as just keeping you in the dark about a lot of things with the Cels, like I believe it's the first time we see Juiz really being used for something dark when the detective Kondo is like, Juiz, kill these two assholes for me, who are asking him for the money, and then someone just drives up in a car and shoots them both.
Yeah, no, that was a cool part, and it really establishes that character. I kind of wish we got to see a bit more of him because he said at one point, I tried to do it, and I realized really quickly that you just can't change the world with that much money. And I like to think he was this really idealistic cop, and he tried to clean up the dirty cops in his neighborhood, and then he just realized it was impossible, and he was sort of broken by that. And I would have liked to see some of that.
Well, literally, I think his dying words was something like, I tried to do good, didn't I? Something like that.
Something to that effect.
So that was interesting. And it's sort of implied that, because how his wife ends up stabbing him, it's like when you text your mistress, don't send it to your wife. But I feel like
He was a screw up.
What's interesting is because I feel like no one's that dumb. I wonder if one of the other Celisao forwarded that to.
I don't know.
To
I have been that dumb,
wife.
not with a mistress, but sending texts
What did I say? You have a mistress?
most profane texts to my mother.
Oh, yeah,
He
that
has
would be
done
bad.
that. He sent stuff like that to me. He's mixed me and his mom up, which confuses me to no end.
I'm bad at phoning.
Apparently.
But if you're texting your mistress, don't you double check and
I feel like you should, but I mean, when you're that excited,
Maybe. But I don't know. Yeah, so all the stuff with Kondo I think was interesting, and he gave us some of the hints about what a Celisao is. The fact that there was 12 of them. And sort of gave. Even though he was kind of a jerk to Takizawa, at the end he told him a lot of the information he needed. And I did. I actually was curious about this, so I went on some currency exchange site to look it up.
I did.
10 billion yen
I did the same thing.
In 2009 yen to dollar
I didn't do that.
conversion is $102 million. So
it's a lot, but it really isn't enough to make a huge change. Probably.
it's a lot, and you can definitely make a change, But
Save a country?
that guy who the doctor who we're introduced to in episode 4, I think it is, who he built this whole hospital thing, that probably used up all of his 100 million,
Yeah,
So
especially with all those bribes.
yeah, with all the bribes in the building,
He was the
whatever that
coolest
must have
guy.
cost.
I liked him.
He was cool, and it was nice. In the end, it turned out that he wasn't actually killed by the supporter. He had
was
his
surprised.
memory erased. So it's nice. You get to get on living. That's nice. And when we get to him, actually, that's one of my favorite scenes in the show. Honestly, is where he drugs Takizawa, and Takizawa wakes up, grabs the phone, and those pink bars just start going around the room, and he gets told all the information about the Celisao, all the rules of the game. That was just visually a cool scene as well. It's plot dumping all this info about the plot that we really wanted to know. And another little detail I noticed when the narrator is talking about the rules of the game, it actually flashes to it's one of those things where it's showing the scene, but it's not fully animated. It's one still, stays on screen for a second, then another still, and then another still, just showing the animation and more jittery sort of look. But it's the scene from the movie with Takizawa giving Mr. Outside the newspaper.
Yeah.
So they actually show that there, but they don't show faces. They obscure that.
And they don't show that it's you assume it's a limo or something. It's a cab.
Yeah.
And I love that.
No, I did like that. We'll get into that with the movie, but I thought that was something pretty interesting. And although I sort of went back and forth on whether I liked Osagi, the guy who liked Saki, you had to feel bad for him when he saw Saki driving on the motorcycle with Takizawa, when he was going to take her out on a date or whatever, and he just drowns himself in beer afterwards. Or was it champagne? Because he was going to the really nice restaurant, which is great, And that's also, it was around there where Saki goes to her job interview, and the Japanese businessman just blow her off and purposely spill the ramen on her dress to get her to leave.
Sooner, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how true to life that is, but it was pretty eye-opening, and pretty setting up the theme for the show, because I think afterwards, she tells the story to Takizawa, and he kisses her, which is okay, we're going there. And he then talks about I'm going to change this country. Your story has inspired me. So it's since he doesn't have a past, hearing Saki's, tale of misery and woe about how the young are being oppressed that gets him to come up with this plan to use Eden of the East.
Somehow.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, I mean, obviously Eden of the East is important in the end, for him to solve the missile crisis, but I wonder, he couldn't have been planning that at the time because he didn't know that more missiles were coming.
No.
So he must have just done it as a favor to Saki and wanted to get involved with these friends and legitimately thought it was a cool project. I mean,
I thought he was genuinely thinking somehow this was going to change the world. And, a facial recognition software that advanced really could. And I thought that was part of his plan. And this is where the show gets me the most is I love movies like Ocean's 11, where you get to see the plotting and the it seems to have a very similar feel. It's you have all of this money and you just have to do something that seems so impossible, and you get to see the machinating and you get some things left out so that there's some plot twists. That's kind of what I was hoping for. I wanted to see him plotting his way through trying to do something that seemed impossible, and because we never saw his mental thought process or anyone's thought process. You just are in the dark as to what he's doing all the time. He's just driving around on a scooter, and he seems to have some form of goal, but you don't really know what that goal is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there are parts where he's going after the Johnny Hunter, when he's driving on his motorcycle, but then there are other points, especially near the end, where you really don't know what his solution is, to the missile crisis. And part of that's part of the drama. So it's a surprise when he's like, okay, all you 20,000 NEETs, go on Eden of the East to solve this problem, And I did bring up, the Johnny Hunter stuff earlier, and you sort of reacted to that. So what was your impression of her and that sort of arc of the show? Because that lasts for a couple episodes.
So when that started happening, I sent people the text message. This show has a real tonal dissonance problem where sometimes it's really goofy and funny. And sometimes it's very serious, and then it gets randomly dark, where there's just this woman who kidnaps random people who you don't who at first just seem like normal guys, puts them in gimp masks, forces them to have sex with her, and if they can't please her, she cuts their Johnnies off, and then leaves them to bleed to death, and then just uses her crazy phone to disintegrate the bodies and fly away into the night. But the show jumps around in tone a lot, especially in the beginning, and it's weird, and he starts hallucinating at points, and you're like, why are you hallucinating? Why are there aliens biting you and stuff?
Yeah.
And it makes it mysterious, and you don't know what's going on, but it also is what type of show are you trying to be?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix of things. It tries to be, at least. Because I feel like at least the most of the hallucinations, because he only has 2 in the show, and there's 1 in the movie, and the 1 in the movie I really didn't get. The 2 in the show were where he screamed at the aliens when you learned about the NEETs later and how they betrayed him. I feel like that did connect, still being weird, but it's somewhat connected. And then I do like the Johnny Hunter stuff in that it shows here's this person who's kind of a serial killer, being given one of these,
He is a serial killer.
Right. Okay, is a serial killer, being given one of these, phones, and what does she do with it? And she basically said she didn't use it for anything except her Johnny hunting stuff, otherwise she was the CEO of this really rich company. So that was interesting, and the show was dark earlier, with the stuff with Detective Kondo, how he just killed those people or whatever. But it did, the part that really got to me as far as I didn't really understand why the show was doing it was when Saki shows up, and Takizawa's okay, and she sprouts the big black wings and flies out of there.
And it shows on the phone Juiz send me a special effects thing, and I'm like, what kind of special effects do that? Because I want some of them.
Yeah, because I was at first I was okay, did this show just
a green screen?
Did this show just suddenly go
Real world green screen.
into magic? And I was really kind of freaked out. And then they show the shot of the phone and the illusion thing. So I was okay, so it's not magic. So at least you're trying to justify it. But I don't know what sort of illusion kit would let you do that because that looked pretty realistic to me.
And at one point, they sort of justify her character by saying that she only hunts down serial rapists and bad people. But I don't know. it's an interesting thing, and at some point you don't hate her character, but she's always
Yeah.
a character that you aren't quite comfortable around, especially if you're a guy.
Yeah, well, it's sort of implied that she may have been like raped in the past or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
pretty
that.
heavily implied.
You know, and they do a good job of making you think that Osagi's actually been kidnapped because of the shot of his
Yeah.
bag and everything, and then it turns out, oh wait, his
The
bag
guy
was
just stole
stolen. You know, so they do a good bit of trickery with that. I just do feel like with the Black Angel Wings thing, it's like you could have just like walked out of the door like a human being. Why did she didn't have to do that? She just did it for dramatic effect.
wanted to
Well,
be
I mean,
like
it
the
does sort of
Avenger of
enhance
the
the
Night.
legend. It enhances the legend of the Johnny Hunter. It makes the serial killer something beyond human.
She was going for like a Night Angel kind of vibe.
Yeah,
More
I can
literal
understand that
sense.
maybe if she was in front of like a public crowd, but it was just Saki who saw it.
Hey,
so.
she didn't know Saki was going to tell anyone.
Yeah, she get to go tell about this avenging angel chick.
And then they
thing.
think Saki was crazy and throw her in the nut
something-
house.
We have
That
camera
too.
phones for a reason.
I suppose so. And then we get on to like after the Johnny Hunter stuff, we get to like this sort of mini arc with
plot.
Panties, which I
love
thought
Panties.
He was a
Love him.
cool
See,
character.
I like him, but his whole thing, his whole setup for his character is so weird. Like in the show that wants to be serious most of the time.
Well,
And it's like, well, my only pair of pants fell out the window. Well, I guess I'm never leaving the house again.
I think my problem, the way I interpreted that, is I think he's supposed to be like a commentary on society and like how easily they like the NEETs will give up on like the rest of the world if something bad happens to them. So like, of course, he wasn't not leaving the house only because he has pants. We live in a world. Amazon existed in 2009.
you did. Yes.
But I think the point was like he was just so like complacent and like scared of like failure that he was willing to just stay inside and not do anything and like give up on any project that was actually like worth something.
Well, except that his projects actually turned out to be kind of useful because he was doing all this research on the Cels and the NEETs and
Eventually.
all that.
I mean, eventually, but at some point he
And built a world computer that can apparently answer any question you ask it, which seems pretty damn awesome to me.
But like they're talking when they first introducing the characters, like they're talking about all these really cool things that he was trying to do, and they said, and he was like, "Hey, what do you do with all those ideas?" And yeah, as soon as he started getting anywhere with it, he just stopped because he got bored.
Yeah. I will say, Andrew, I don't know. Eden of the East is like, I suppose it is a serious show, but it always maintained like a certain level of silliness that I wasn't bothered by. Like he's missing he lost his only pair of pants.
But that
you know?
like got, I don't know, that felt weird to me because, he was very integral to like a very serious part of the show where they were really discovering like what was going on.
It's quirky.
Not everything has to be quirky.
True. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny because eventually he has to go outside and the pants that Saki bought for him are
They're
way
like
too
doll
small.
pants when he picks them up, and I'm like, how did you get this on anything?
Yeah, that it was a little like over dramatized, I think, or maybe like they shrank in the wash or something. I don't know what was going on there, but that was funny, and it created for some nice conflict there because he's being all secretive, with the panties, telling about the Celestial, like I'm a Celestial, I'll tell you all this information, blah blah blah, and meanwhile, Saki like he's keeping it a secret from Saki and Mitan, because he doesn't want to get them involved. And that's around the time that Osagi is like puts the picture of Takizawa on Eden of the East, is starting to figure this out, and finds the mall, so they're really starting to become suspicious of Takizawa. And I believe that's around the time we're introduced to Mononobe and Yuki, who is number 1 and number 10, sort of our two primary villains, I think, in the TV show. Mononobe is definitely the series-wide antagonist, if the show can be said to have one.
Yeah,
And
outside of outside.
yeah, and when they ran over Panties, I thought he
was
was.
sad.
I was totally thought he was dead because the world computer
I
even
thought so,
said
too.
so. Like, you are dead, a hero then dead. But then in the 11th episode, it's just like, oh yeah, he actually lived through that. He's in the hospital. So good on him for being made of stern stuff. I guess all that fat protected him, but they tricked me with that one for sure.
So I loved number 1. I thought he was really fun. Mm-hmm. Number 10, I don't think he understands like how terrorism works
Yeah.
because you're making a statement doesn't work unless you make a statement.
Well-
so firing missiles at something and then
'Cause-
just not saying anything about it is just you killing people.
Well,
like
see,
that's not a
it
statement,
was-
that's murder.
But the thing with it was, Japan was attacked by these missiles, and then after a while, like when nothing ever came of that, like there was no statement from terrorism, nobody claimed responsibility. They launched an investigation. They found nothing.
No one
they
says
found
why it
nothing, which bothers me on some profound level because
Yeah.
those missiles didn't appear out of nowhere. Like something that catastrophic, you'd think everybody would be like, "Holy crap!" Like we need to find out what happened. But it just got to the point where it's like, "Oh yeah, missiles hit Japan. Yeah, I
But,
guess
like,
it's a
nothing
thing
happened.
that happens sometimes."
Yeah, I suppose you could
Oh,
argue
well.
that Juiz somehow made sure that there weren't any satellite cameras, on that part of the
You
globe
can
at
do
the
all
time.
that, but like, how do you explain like the public outcry of just we got attacked by missiles? We
Well-
should do something about that.
Right. Well, that's why they called it Careless Monday, because the prime minister said like I was careless,
How does that explain like why the public should be like, what the hell? We got attacked by missiles.
It was kinda
what if that happens again?
They kind of talked about that. They said like, well, since no one died and nothing happened again, we kind of just like stopped caring.
Yeah, well, you know what? I guess it's Monday. And on Monday's forecast, we have a partly cloudy with a slight chance of missile attacks.
Yes, 6 missiles.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that was the explanation they gave in the show, at least.
But that's not a very good explanation.
It's not.
a cop-out for like why everybody's still not angry. Because if that happened in America, God, people would still be angry about that.
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Like, it doesn't matter if you blew up a tree.
I think it's a combination of the fact like that no one was killed by it, and it's trying to be like a whole message about like how fast things move in the
No,
media.
I understand that, but it's a little bit exaggerated.
A little bit. And it's not like people weren't wondering what happened on Careless Monday, but they just
Stopped caring enough to talk about it in public.
to really force the issue. And obviously like, they did an investigation and didn't find anything, so people were just sort of lost interest after that, I assume. Had they done an investigation and found something, then be like, okay, let's go, take care of those guys because they shot missiles at us.
See, I don't quite buy that because if you never find something out, like think about DB Cooper. No one knows what happened to him, and he's got like a cult, at least one. Like if this was still a mystery, there would be so many people just flocking around trying to solve it.
Yeah, well, they did talk about how there were like tons of conspiracy theories about it,
Yeah, and Panties is
Obsessed
main
with
poster
it.
on his message board about it. So
Right. Yeah, and I think that's around the point where we're into like the last few episodes of the show, which is where things start picking up again because like Mononobe, takes Takizawa to the warehouse where the Juizes are being held and tells them, basically this is all about, how Mr. Outside is Saizo Otto, thinking that he's dead and, that they're going to do more missile attacks, and they're all working together on this. Him, Yuki, and Tsuji is his name. Number 2, the really rich guy who didn't really give a crap.
I'm glad they make something more of that character in the movies because he was really just like a punk rich guy in
Basically.
the show, and I'm glad they did something more with him.
Yeah. I'm glad they did something more with him in the movies. At the same time, I liked how not all of the Cels were like, really into playing this game. Like all of them did it differently, like
Oh yeah.
that was something I liked that was unique because all of them were really unique people. Mr. Outside obviously chose them all for very different reasons because they brought different philosophy, to the game, as it were. But another little detail I noticed, rewatching the show and like knowing things, when you see when Mononobe and Takizawa are walking towards like the building where they have that whole conversation, the Juiz trucks go by them at that exact moment.
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so if you rewatch it, you notice little things like that. And and I think in episode 12, where Saki and Mitan are like going back to the mall and talking with Hirasawa on the phone about what they've learned from Takizawa, about his past and everything. You see an old man driving the cab in front of them, and they even when they get out of the cab, the camera pans over to the cab driver. So they're doing hints like that. Like
Yeah.
they were obviously planning on a second season in these movies, when the TV show came out.
A weird line that Takizawa makes that I love/hate because I knew the second he said it, it was going to be the case. He's talking about what he thought the Juizes were. And he was like, oh, it's a supercomputer. I always just imagine like a room of women with voice changes. I'm like, shit, that's what it is. That's what it is. They may have supercomputers, but it's just a bunch of women.
Except, okay, this is what I was going to bring up earlier because I don't think that's the case. Because remember, when he in the Paradise Lost, he's at like the Juiz truck and he calls Juiz and says like, I'm touching you right now. Can you feel it? And Juiz is like talking to him. And we know that the actual like Juiz women are upstairs, watching him.
See, I interpreted that as she was talking to him on the phone. Like she was just sort of looking at him through the window.
No.
Oh, you're touching my back. That's cute. Yeah, hi.
Yeah, no. I'm pretty sure if he can craft a supercomputer that can do all of that, I'm pretty sure he can make it an AI that can talk.
He wanted to give his grandchildren some jobs, okay? He didn't want them to turn into neats.
Apparently. And I guess it seems like their jobs, because they weren't driving the trucks, there were truck drivers that did that. They were just there to like supervise it, I guess. And obviously their voices were the Juiz voice. So I guess he drew just from that in some way.
But each Juiz had like a different personality. Like the movie director one's was really angry all the time and she hated him. And by the movie, Takizawa's one was like really clingy with him and she really liked him.
See, I feel like that's less a thing that all their Juizes were unique and more that by the time of the movies, there's just something a little more eccentric about Juiz, because even the director guy says, you've been acting really strange lately, like ever since blah, blah, blah. Because in the TV show, we see, we see several of them, Kondo, Takizawa's, Mononobe, the Johnny Hunter girl, all of them talk to Juiz, and all in the TV show, Juiz always sounds the same. It's always that same voice, that same sort of monotone, whereas in the movies, Juiz starts to express emotions.
I think she might refer to this different saviors in different ways. Like she says, like with the Johnny Hunter, she calls her like my beautiful savior.
That's true. There was because each one is its own computer, so it makes sense that there could be some difference between them. But we really didn't see that in full effect till the movie, I feel like. Because I guess why the Juizes started being more emotional, I don't really know. Mononobe's, I feel like, was
That
still
time of the month.
Was still pretty like monotone, but like
Well, he barely used her.
true. But Takizawa's, which we heard all the time, it was always monotone. The TV show, like you said, kind of got clingy, which was funny.
Cute.
It was cute. And I do like in the movie in King of Eden where the director guy is being yelled at. When he's talking about like, oh, in every movie, there's a scene where
And then
they die in the
I
shower.
have literally researched every movie, and there is not a movie where the characters die in an explosion at the
I
very
think he said something
beginning.
like that's creative license or something like that.
Andrew, is there a movie that you know where the main characters die at the very beginning?
Well, they're not the main characters then, if they die at the beginning.
Oh.
I mean, that's just like a fact of storytelling. Like, okay, Watchmen, the comedian dies in the movie in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
At the book, before the first page, is he a main character?
No.
No, he's not. He's a side character, very important side character, very integral to the plot, but he's still dead in like the first 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
if the character does die in the first 5 minutes and it's one of those stories like Ghost or something where they come back, then A, they rarely die in an explosion, and B, well then, it's a story about ghosts. And is it really dead then? Because they're still around to interact with the plot and stuff. So
It's true. And so what did you guys think of like the last episode, where things really come to a head? It turns out like the Juizes, got put in these trucks, were sent away. So like Takizawa still has his Juiz, so he can still stop the missiles. And all the Neats show up naked, of course,
Like-
to the.
That's my main problem right there. Like they just show up like conveniently.
They
just
show up
up
conveniently.
right outside of the mall on a boat.
and it's just like, why did you show up?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that previous Takizawa like said, okay, you're going to be gone for 3 months, so that the outrage over what's it called, Careless Monday would die down. Then you would all come back.
But he doesn't tell 'em.
But and somehow he times it so they arrive exactly when he needs them.
See, he had no way
Plot
of knowing when the
convenience.
missiles attack would happen again. So I feel like that was just convenience.
Yeah.
I feel like that was just plot convenience.
Unless, I don't know, this is stretching a little, but maybe he that was one of the things he instructed Juiz to do, later on, sort of like how, he ordered her to become a king, and in order to make that happen, she made a lot of other little things
So just
happen.
make sure that they get back in time if another missile attack happens.
Yes, something general like that, and so she's made it happen at the perfect time, basically. That's the best way I can think to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, that does explain it, but it's sort of like the stable time loop argument. We've been talking about this a lot because of games, but it's like, oh, it happened because we said it had to happen, and that's what happened, so it happens.
It's a little plot convenient. It's true. And it is nice hearing that whole explanation. We finally hear about Takizawa's past and how, he basically portrayed himself as the villain, in order to evacuate use the 20,000 needs to evacuate those areas, where he knew the missiles were coming, so that no one died that day, but then got portrayed as the villain by the needs and by the public and thus erased his memories, to get rid of the despair.
Yeah, I think he's as an individual, very sensitive to abandonment and betrayal because he was abandoned as a child by his mom is doing something nice for him and then he turns around and she's just not there anymore. So I feel like maybe they're going for as a character he's just very sensitive to abandonment and betrayal, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. And the second movie just goes on that. And it's so awesome, but yeah,
it does do that. I hadn't thought of that as a way of reading this character, but. It is also a pretty funny scene, I think, where Hirasawa and the Eden of the East guys leave the computer out on the wherever they were hanging out, and thus have to get naked and disguise themselves amongst the neets. Of course, Saki and Michan show up and run terrified through the throng there, which is so. That last episode had several funny moments, which I appreciated. For as dark and serious as it was.
This show has a lot of nudity in it.
Oh yeah, no,
it's weird.
It's very very upfront about that.
It shows you in the very first episode. It's like if you're not comfortable with this, you should really just leave.
Pretty much, and a unique way of censoring too with the scribbles.
I liked it.
It was nice. It makes it stand out. Okay, I haven't seen that before. I'll give you credit where credit is due. And I did I thought his whole plan to destroy the missiles was actually pretty smart. With having them all use Eden of the East, to post their ideas and
Crowdsourcing. I thought that was actually a really interesting way of using this cultural group that doesn't do much except they talk on the internet a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's using their skill set and showing them that they can do something with it. I liked it. And
he uses Juiz to basically sort through. Okay, find the top most applicable ideas from this group. And he basically, I sort of thought in the second movie too, his basically solution to the problem was also crowdsourcing, basically believing in the citizens, which is the opposite of Mononobe, which I think is pretty interesting. And he shoots down the missiles, and you do get that cool scene of him standing on the top of the merry-go-round, bang, with his finger gun. And that, I forget the name, whatever song that is, that English song that plays there at the end is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. That's a song that repeats throughout the series. So episode 11 had a cool climax, and then it ends with a giant cliffhanger, basically, not answering any questions.
It does. It just kind of.
But it does foreshadow for something really cool in the second movie, the gold ring, and it.
Yeah, it does the gold ring thing, and he
was that the first? That was the first.
He puts the phone up to his ear. You hear that noise again, and he slides the phone into her pocket. After he's told Juiz, "I want to be king of this country," which definitely kind of struck me a bit out of nowhere. There was this reference to in the very first episode, I met a prince, and Juiz calls him a prince. Then at the very end of that episode, but it was do you really know what that entails? What that's gonna do, and it ends up creating a lot of problems for him in the movies. So it's was that really a good idea?
I think that's why Juiz starts changing. It's just no one ever thought to just ask me to make them the king. They always went around elaborate ways. It's why can't I just ask Juiz to make me win? Buy me the competition, Juiz. You've got a lot of money.
Yeah, you can do that, right? I don't need to think of an actual solution. You'll just think of it for me.
I mean, she was good at it.
Yeah. And I did see an interesting theory as far as the whole memory wiping thing that in the show, I think it really is viewed as this less in the negative sense like it is in most things, memory wiping is really bad, but more in the way of it's seeing memory wiping as a new beginning and you trusting your new self, to accomplish what you couldn't, ways ways of like if you erase your old way of thinking and are introduced to a problem, from like that blank slate, then maybe you'll be better at coming up with a solution to the problem.
But it's also interesting because the main character is pretty much the same person no matter how many times he gets his memory wiped.
Yeah, well, because in the second movie,
heart.
I feel like that's the justification for why he erased his memories, in the movies. But then, like the beginning of the second movie, he basically says like, "Yeah, I've regained at least my Takizawa memories." So at that point, he's basically like exactly the same as Takizawa from the TV show.
Which begs the question, what was the point of the erasing the memories for the entirety of the first movie that accomplished nothing except him stumbling around like, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm going to trust you. You seem like a pretty honest chick.
It was all foreshadowing for the second movie.
It's real. Like, then what? Like, the first movie is like, oh, hey, look, we're foreshadowing the second movie. Can I just watch the second movie? No. Sit through this first.
And they introduced that weird director character who just never shows up again except for like a prison rape joke at the very end of the second movie.
That's
Yeah, I don't know. Because I've rewatched the movies, before the podcast, and the first one definitely like is a lead up to the second one, and doesn't conclude many things, but it's still a fun watch. Like I like how the very beginning is like an inverse of the first episode where Saki finds the guns in her coat and she's like stuck there with like the gun in her hand, accidentally pointing it at the crowd. She's wearing Takizawa's coat and it feels a lot like the first episode of the show, which I thought was cool. Mm-hmm. And they do a good job of bringing in this whole mystery of like where the hell is Takizawa, and like she's been looking for him for like months, not being able to find him.
And he just walks up.
Yeah, of course. Bit more plot convenience there.
He gives a
happens
reason
to
though.
be there.
He gives like an explanation for why he was there.
That's true. He does. And I love his solution too to the gun problem. He's just like throw it in the water and run. And it is one thing I do love about Takizawa's character is because on the one hand you could see his cool headedness as a flaw sometimes, like in that he's like too level headed. But at the same time, I feel like we don't get many anime protagonists like that, because you'll get a lot of anime protagonists who are really like whiny and emotional or whatever, and he's just like pretty level headed and is actually able to think on his feet like way better than I ever could. Like when he goes, they're trying to find the taxi, that she left her passport in, and he goes there and like comes up with this story about how Saki is like a terrorist and he's a police officer, to get the taxi guy to give him what he wants. Or how he convinces the guy in the first episode to give him pants, or in the second movie, how he convinces the random NEET to wear the Air King T-shirt and pretend to be him. Like he's
Worst
really
security ever, by the way.
He's really good at being like charismatic and like he wins people over easily.
He's good with people, definitely.
Yeah, which is something I appreciate about his character. I think it makes him pretty
He's
interesting.
not Naruto or Sasuke. He's not emotionless to the extent of Sasuke, and he's not like goofy to the extent of Naruto. He's an interesting balance in between where you get like almost a real person.
Right. And I also did like how the Tsuji, the Celestial number 2, actually does get involved in this movie and actually has a pretty interesting plan, how he's...
I love it. He's just a marketing agent, and he's just a businessman.
Kind of reminds me of the marketing guy from Samurai Flamenco, who like gets really obsessed with him. He's sort of similar. He's like doing all this merchandising, doing the whole Air King thing, and then comes up with this plan to have Takizawa come back wearing the Air King shirt, send this political message to neighboring countries, and have Takizawa be like assassinated to really just throw things into chaos.
And he has number 10, the screw up who, shattered his phone so he couldn't be tracked. He uses this guy who wants to kill Takizawa anyway as the foreigner who's gonna, set off this war. And it was awesome.
Yeah. No, he was
smart.
He was smart. Yeah. When that Yuki guy showed up like looking like a bum, I was like, oh geez, you've fallen pretty far, haven't you?
Well, he wasn't the brightest bulb in the anything.
I mean, he was Mononobe's hitman basically in the TV show. So yeah, I thought that was all interesting. It was kind of nice seeing Saki, having to convince Takizawa, about all this stuff. And we got to go to the theater that he worked at where he saw Dumbo with his mom, for the first time. And they do a lot of like paralleling with the TV show, like how Saki's worried that he was going to leave her, in the movie theater again.
Yeah.
And it turned out
the gold ring.
Right. And they bring back the gold ring thing. And around there is also where, the director guy makes their the heater in his apartment explode, when he's trying to get them to do the shower thing, trying to kill him, and arguing with his Juiz, which was a really pretty great scene, actually. Because that was like the first time we saw Juiz being like angry about anything.
Or like it's the first time you really see Juiz acting differently with like amongst the different people. And you see that, and you're like, I wonder if she does act differently with each cell. And then Takizawa picks up his phone, and she's needy, and she's like, "You're back. I love you. You're the fun one."
Yeah, and they also did something clever because I remember when I was watching the first movie, like there were some police officers who looked like they were going after Saki when like she had the gun or whatever, and then like a car crashed into a fire hydrant, and like they went off to deal with that. And I was like, oh, that's awfully coincidental. And it turns out that what's her name? It's gonna make me mad. Kuroha, the Johnny Hunter, number 11, was out there basically looking after Takizawa, and Saki, and helping them out, which was pretty cool. Apparently, under orders or money from the Prime Minister's wife, she was doing it all at her request.
Yeah, but she also at one point said like, "Yeah, I've got my money down on who's gonna win this competition, and other people have their money down on the other guy, and I think you're gonna win."
Yeah, well, she obviously bonded with Takizawa pretty hard in the short time that they spent together, which is cool. And we get more about Takizawa's past is really focused on a lot in these movies, which I think is pretty interesting. How he like goes to the merry-go-round with Saki and like remembers this stuff about him going there with his mother. How his mom apparently hated movies, probably because he just insisted on watching them all the time, which I think,
or because she was a distant woman who didn't like the child that she had and just screwed everyone she met.
That's kind of true. The mom is never really made very sympathetic.
No, she is a woman who sleeps with a lot of people and is a mistress to one person and screwing another guy. There's no one really knows who his real dad is because his mom's a bit of a slut.
A little bit. Because they make you think near the end of the second movie like that he's the prime minister's son, and everything's pointing towards it. And then she just hands him the paperwork, and it's like, oh, guess I'm not. Mom got around. I think he even makes a joke about it.
Busy lady.
Which I thought was pretty cool. And I will say, the first movie is definitely, I think, weaker overall than the second movie, but it does have a nice climax to it where Mononobe sends those missiles after the Juiz trucks, which is the first we see of those, and we see Kuroha sacrifice hers, in order to save Takizawa's, which I thought was a cool scene. A movie ends with them going on the plane back to Japan. One thing I did want to mention, we haven't talked about it much, but both the opening and ending in both the TV show and the movies, I actually quite like quite a bit. They sort of have this sort of like, I want to call it Photoshop-y style, even though that's not quite right, but lots of just still images, with just really cool like sort of designs.
Overlays.
Yeah. And they do a good job with that in the opening of the show, and then in the openings for both the movies. And then the ending in the TV show is that cool kind of paper cutout thing, with him shooting down like the missiles that are pencils and all that, which was kind of cool. And then we get into, I guess, getting into the second movie, which I definitely feel like is the better one.
Oh yeah,
I
love it
much
except for the ending.
I actually own it on iTunes because you can buy it off iTunes for like $3. It's really cheap.
It's also on Netflix, so yay.
Yeah. We talked about the scene near the beginning where the he randomly runs into that need in the bathroom and manages to convince him to to pretend to be him, which worked out very well, actually.
He's attacked by his phone in another one of his hallucinatory dreams where he's afraid of being abandoned and betrayed.
I suppose that's how you could read that, because like with the ones in the TV
He's
show,
trusting Juiz so much to protect him, and what if Juiz betrays him? What if Juiz leaves him?
I could see that, because like in the ones in the TV show with the weird like gray aliens, you can read those as the neats. That's pretty obvious. But yeah, the phone, it's like, what are you supposed to think about that? But I like your idea.
It was
of him
weird.
Just being afraid of betrayal, which is nice.
It's a shot in the dark.
And something we probably should have mentioned about the last movie. Like I said near the beginning of the podcast, I think they do a better job with the Eden of the East characters, because they're actually like actively have this task force to try to help him out, and are looking through the logs and Panties has this whole big diagram about like which of the Cels are harmless, which ones they need to be worried about, and talking about theories like what if the supporter doesn't really exist, what if Mr. 12 is Mr. Outside, like they get to a lot of important plot things.
Those characters actually start doing things, and a lot of them like grow. Like Panties leaves his room. Mitan starts actually talking to Panties because there's intended to be a bit of a ship there because they're both the programmers.
I don't know if I'd ship them because is she like middle school or
I think
like
she's intended to be the same age as them.
She looks really young then.
Yeah. I'm not sure. That's the way I interpret it because I stopped like associating age with anime characters because they don't show any sign of aging. So why should it really matter?
Depends though. Kalad does it.
It's
Tomoyo
very
does look
ambiguous
older
sometimes.
Sometimes.
In some shows, and by some I mean most, it's very ambiguous.
Yeah. Or they just don't represent their ages at all. Cough cough Yoko 14.
I was about to say Yoko and Simon are apparently the same age.
No, Simon's younger than Yoko.
Is he?
Yeah, he's like 10, I think.
No, I think he's intended to be the same age as her.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll look that up. I thought he was supposed to be younger because she treats him like a younger kid.
Well, that's because she's clearly older than him.
She's clearly older than 14.
Look, the in-canon explanation of her is that they have a different counting system, but whatever.
Yeah, a different way of measuring years because they don't really have a moon.
They don't
Like,
have
they're
a sun or a moon. So
Well,
yeah.
no, they do have a moon because we deal with the moon. They bring it back. Remember?
Well,
That was a
no,
plot point.
as in they're
lived
underground the entire
underground
time.
for most of their
Oh.
lives. Anyway, we're off topic.
Yes. Off of Gurren Lagann, back on Eden of the
Back
East.
on
Lagann.
the East. Yeah, the East.
Yes. So I like that, and they had some plot points with like how they had to shut down, Eden of the East because Juiz was using it, to erase Akira Takizawa, place him with Akira Inuma, and there's all that stuff going on, and Mononobe is like investigating them, and tapping their phones and all this stuff, So I liked how in the movies we sort of had like
A lot of intrigue.
a lot of intrigue and different plots going on, with like them at home, and the stuff with Takizawa and Saki, and eventually like they split up, and Panties and the one character Kasuga, go off and do their thing, and then like Hirasawa's off talking with Mr. Outside, so they split everyone up and have these different plots going on,
And
Saki and Osagi are looking for his mom.
There's so many things going on at once, and all of the plot lines are actually really interesting. Like, I want to see Mr. Outside talk more, but I also want to know about the mom, and I want to know what Takizawa is actually doing for once. Like, what are you doing? Let me see your plans.
I must know your plans. And he comes up once again with a pretty smart one. He like takes his Juiz truck and keeps it close. Takes him to
flies it.
Nonobe's and keeps them together so he can't destroy his Juiz without destroying his own.
Yeah, that was a smart idea, and he's just driving it. And yeah, you're
apparently-
totally certified to drive all things.
Apparently, and also I noticed in both those scenes, both when the sis gets in the Mononobe's truck and when Takizawa gets in his truck, they just turn on the keys and just start driving it. Like apparently the drivers just left the keys in the
lazy
ignition.
drivers.
Like, what are they thinking? I would not hire them. Apparently,
It's not like I'm hauling super important supercomputers. I'm just hauling oil or something.
yeah. And we did get a nice. I did like how they showed like that there were the Juizes, were Otto's granddaughters, and they all had like. They all looked different,
very similar.
Similar but different, and all had like the same voice, and talked about how like, oh, we got to abide by the rules, So if since Takizawa, stole it without using his log, then grandfather can't know either. We can't betray like the rules of the game.
And they're clearly rooting for Takizawa.
Yeah, she's like, yeah, they're probably just like pick favorites. Like, who's your favorite? Oh, mine's number 9. Oh, mine's number 6. Blah blah blah.
Mine's 7. He's an idiot. I kind of want to set him on fire.
A little bit. And it was interesting seeing the whole explanation with the mom, because in episode 11, once again seeing little references. In one of the flashbacks of Takizawa dealing with the NEETs, we saw a lady like look at him, and when he like looked back, the lady was gone, and the dog just came up to him, and that's how he got the dog. And it turns out, oh, that's the mom, and she's very reluctant to admit it, and never does so outright until she mentions the 500 yen comment.
And even then, like, that's not even her like flat out admitting it. That's just sort of like a big. I guess it is flat out admitting it, but she never says it.
Yeah. But she knew that saying the 500 yen then we would tip it off to Saki. So she's just being clever about it, I suppose. And I did also appreciate Osagi there because he's like, he stays behind in the bar and is like going to, sacrifice himself, to those men in the suits, so Saki can get away. So
And then he has no signs of a scuffle on him once he comes back. And
no, he does. His shirt's a little ripped. It doesn't look like he got the shit beat out of him like he probably should have, I'll admit. But I appreciate the fact that he still, like, even though Saki, is definitely in love with Takizawa, not him, he still is nice to her, and treats her like a friend, which is like, okay, I appreciate you for that. And then we have this whole plot line where they all basically coalesce at the prime minister's wife's mansion, and that's where like the climax of the movie takes place with like him talking to her. She's a really intense character, like always, being pretty frank with Takizawa, which I kind of appreciated. Like she was no nonsense woman.
She was. She's like, I want to know, are you my husband's bastard kid?
Yeah. Well, she just goes up there and plucks a hair off of his head, and it's like, I want this analyzed immediately.
She has no reason to like the kid. The kid's like associated with terrorists.
Terrorism, her husband's infidelity. It's really just not a good situation for him to be in for her. And yet, he kind of overcomes that because he's such a nice and just cool dude.
Yeah, well, because at the end, they even sort of imply that she saw something of her late husband in him, with his like passionate spirit for wanting to change the country or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, terrorists, they're so driven.
Exactly.
They really believe.
And I also like how Mononobe's genius way to take care of Tsuji, the guy in the boat, was to just send a bunch of tax guys his way.
No!
He's like, well played or something like that.
But at that point, Tsuji's doing super well without even his phone. Like, he doesn't even have a Juiz at that point. His got exploded. Along
True.
with...
But he failed at getting Takizawa to actually show up in the... Well...
No, he wore the shirt.
He wore the shirt, and the NEET who faked being Takizawa wore the shirt as well, but he didn't get him assassinated, obviously.
Well, that's because at the very last second, number 10 tried to shoot number 1 instead.
Yeah, Yuki kind of messed up with that. Because I guess he was just so insulted by Mononobe not knowing who he was that he was like, I'm going to kill you.
And then he got run over by a car.
Mentally unhinged, and notice Yuki probably, we would assume he died from that, but when Panties was run over by a car, he toughed it out.
I mean, Jello, man.
That's like I said, that stuff helps out when you get run over by cars, apparently.
No, it doesn't.
And I like the fact that, Mononobe and Takizawa have this nice long conversation about like what Mononobe is like really after, what his plan is, and he wants Takizawa to drop out of the game. And he has like this relatively well thought out, argument about like, I want to downsize the country, and focus on like the economic sectors that are going to increase our control of the global market, and all of this.
So
sort
just
of
like
stuff.
a totalitarian regime.
A bit, he talks about how he wants to like limit the citizens' freedoms without them realizing it, basically. He's trying to get the old prime minister back into power, apparently, the old ministry.
Just because that's an easier one for him to manipulate, but yeah.
Seems that way, and he has no interest in actually being prime minister because he views the position as like a figurehead more than anything.
Yeah, it's just the individual for people to yell at.
Yeah, and I feel like that's around the time where you get like the real big difference between Mononobe and Takizawa, which I like, is how he has nothing but contempt for the citizens, doesn't trust them, thinks they're stupid, whereas Takizawa like believes in them, and that's the whole point of his video message. He basically tells them like through his whole acting like a terrorist thing, like he always does, trying to force them to be good and basically like, make a positive change. You old people step down, make way for the new, make this country a better place, and to, show that I'm serious. I'm going to send you all a 1 yen promissory note, basically.
He's also trying to get the young people to get up and do something. Like he's saying, all of you meet me here.
And they're definitely hammering home the whole savior thing, with him, how he's talking about how he's going to take them all the NEETs to paradise,
where they work and make money.
Right. And they at the end of the show, they actually do kind of convert on that mall and turn it into a NEETs paradise,
socialist,
as it were.
Utopia.
Was it socialist?
Not really socialist. I'm sorry, sociology makes me, I'm taking that class and it makes me associate the two terms because, that's what most of the utopia things have been.
I see. And I also like the whole explanation. I think with Mr. Outside, I personally liked a lot. Because the idea that this super rich, super powerful old man is now just a taxi driver and asks the people in his car, like, how taxi drivers might ask you hypothetical questions to get a conversation going. Except in his case, he'll actually give you the 10 billion yen, and plant things in your brain and give you a magical cell phone.
You see, the problem with this was, wouldn't they remember? Like, being
some
asked
point,
that?
yeah.
Like, when you're at, like, okay, I know you think, oh, that was a hypothetical conversation, whatever. I don't care. But, like, when that actually happens to you, like when you actually get a cell phone that has 10 billion on it, like you can go told to go fix Japan, shouldn't one of them have think, I feel like I was asked this at some point. When was that? Oh, yeah. That taxi driver guy asked me this exact same question, the situation I am now in.
Shortly beforehand, yeah.
Yeah, well, but it was sort of implied when the doctor was talking about his experience, that he had his phone in a box or whatever, and when he picked it up, the room went crazy, when he was told all the rules of the game or whatever. So I guess it's sort of implied that he decides who he wants to be the Cels, and then somehow knocks them out and implants that chip in their head, and then they wake up and find the phone there and learn the rules of the game, and maybe he erases their memory of him, because he obviously likes memory wiping a lot.
Yeah, and in a plot where memory wiping and stuff like that, and just infinite amounts of money are main plot things, you can really just sort of argue that just happens. Oh well, he wiped that one memory, and I'm like, well, that's kind of lame. Maybe you could talk about that, or just not leave it looking like a plot hole.
Yeah, but I do like how he talks about what did Takizawa say to you. He says I didn't actually ask him, and he got the paper from him, and Takizawa said oh no, you don't have to pay me. The people who only get one, are the ones who actually read it. So the people who get tons of them are the ones who don't read them. And he said, well, that's not a very good business model. I'll make my dues, with the subscriptions from the people who don't read them.
Yeah, off the schmucks
that.
Who don't even bother.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And he has this very well thought out and intelligent sounding discussion with him about how people in this country should want to
make money instead of spend it.
Right.
See the joy in that.
Enjoy making money more than spending money. That would make this country a better place. I actually really liked that. It was very Takizawa, and it makes sense that he was drawn to that. Otto was drawn to that, and then he declares Takizawa the winner, talking about this whole thing with him about his past with how he reconstructed Japan, after World War II sort of thing, which I thought was kind of another interesting cultural perspective thing.
They say we did it wrong, but I mean, what was the right way?
Yeah,
I mean,
what
we got
would have been
something
right?
that looks really nice.
Yeah, so I like that, how he talked about it's hard for us to hear, us old farts to hear, that we need to step down, let the youth of today take over. But he obviously embraces that message and then calls them all and erases all their memories. And definitely sort of implied that there is in fact no supporter who kills people. It's just him erasing your memories when you lose the game. That's sort of what's implied, because in the movie they say that the doctor guy didn't die, but in fact had his memories erased. Just of the game, it seems like, too.
Yeah.
Not everything.
But while we're on the topic of memory wiping, can we talk about the ending where
You mean
all the
that
characters
crap
get their
ending?
minds wiped?
Well, right. Well, that's
And-
basically what happens.
Crap
Yeah,
ending.
that noise goes everywhere, and they're given the gift, and he calls them latent
restart.
saviors, And once again, it is a little strange, but I think if
Crap
we tie in with what the series seems to be telling us, that the memory wiping really is like a blank slate, allowing you to have a new beginning, to make new choices, and actually viewed in more of a positive light, then you could really see it as a gift. Definitely seems to be for number 3, the old woman in the hospital, because she says thank you, Saizo, as she's listening to the weird memory wiping noise. Because I feel like there's something there, and I don't know.
Good thing they looked at her so much.
Yeah, she wasn't important at all, to be frank. I think there's number 7 and number 8 are never referenced in the show. We don't even see them. I
thought
think.
7 was the director guy.
No, he was number 5.
Sure.
So So yeah, there's two Cels that we never even meet. I think actually we see this random middle-aged looking Japanese man like during that montage, like with a phone. I think he might be number 7, but there's at least one Cels we never even see and who doesn't even do anything. Sort of interesting, and like we said, Mononobe and Yuki basically kill each other because of the whole memory wiping thing. And Takizawa, turns out, is kind of just immune to it because he's already wiped his own memory twice.
It's also
that makes
crap.
sense. But
I don't know. I feel like
that's a really shitty procedure if getting it once makes getting it ever again impossible.
Well, and obviously it didn't because he did wipe his memory a
He
second
wiped his
time.
memory twice, so
It's also possible that maybe Mr. Outside didn't erase his memories specifically because he had already done it to himself,
But no, he said, like, I listened to that and I'm fine. And also, he goes to Mr. Otto at the end of the credits, and Mr. Otto's like pretending to not know him in hopes that he doesn't remember him.
I suppose that's true. I hadn't thought of that perspective. So Saizo expects Takizawa to have his memory erased.
And that's why he's just pretending that he's just some guy.
That is interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I guess there's not really a plot explanation given for it. Like a lot of things
There
in
is,
the
it's
show.
just a bad one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm immune to it for reasons.
And then he's like, so yeah, I got to go on the run again because people now, literally everyone knows I'm a terrorist now.
I just admitted to being a terrorist. He understands how to be a terrorist. That, like, you send a message while you're also causing terror, as opposed to just shooting missiles and then sort of pouting.
And you do get a nice scene there where he runs away, and Saki like runs after him and they have their nice kiss, and he says like, I'll come back for you, gives her the phone. So that was sweet, sort of fulfilling that ship. If Clara was here, she'd be happy. And it fast forward 6 months. It sort of shows, like, I think it was nice how Saki said, like, it's not like miraculously Takizawa's message, inspired this big change in Japan. It's more like things are pretty much the same as they were, but there's just like an undercurrent of hope. And like, I feel like some real changes right around the corner sort of thing, which I thought was a nice way to end it.
And I also like not many of the businessmen actually did what his ultimatum said. Like, a few of them did it, and then a few people sort of like kind of hired some of the NEETs, and then just like stopped caring.
Sounded
and then
like
they got
it was
fired.
It was more of a thing, where they showed some positive, movement on that ground when the news was hot, but after it cooled down in the media and people stopped caring, they were like, okay, yeah, we don't need to deal with that anymore.
Exactly. And, the Eden of the East Corporation just got shut down because they were terrorists.
Right. Well, they were suspected of it, yeah. But then they said that they were working together to create a new program that was even better, and they're working with the NEET community that sort of sprang up around that mall, which is cool. And they all sort of say, like, it's 6 months later, and they're like waiting for Takizawa, to return and be their savior, which I thought was kind of cool.
But also they're still saying, like, yeah, a lot of them still just want to kill him.
Yeah, that's the thing though. He runs into two of those two NEETs, individually, who are like really mad at him. But then by the end of it, they're actually kind of like okay with him. Like, well, it all turned out all right in the end. Or like, you're actually a nice guy. I'm gonna do what you say. You're gonna make things better for us, right? So he's surprisingly good at winning people over, kind of like we went into earlier. And I liked how, we had the credits roll, and then at the very end, we see him finally hit Mr. Outside, as he'd been promising to do,
Beats him in the head with a slipper.
The whole show, which is good. If he had punched the old man in the jaw, that would have been a little violent.
That guy's like over 100 and still driving taxis. That guy is resilient. Driving taxis is dangerous.
I loved
it's
it.
also important, but it's important to keep yourself busy and focused.
I loved how
senility.
when he called everyone, and erased their memories. Like, Hirasawa's like, "Well, what are you doing?" And like went after him, and then Mr. Saito like wrestles him down and is like,
down.
Like young little putz like you isn't going to do anything to me, So it's like he's still kind of badass.
Over 100.
Yeah, or maybe Hirasawa's just really weak because he's like a NEET.
Well, both.
So you have that, and then Takizawa ends it, of course, with the cryptic. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. And they drive off together, and you see this last shot of the phone, opening up, and all the numbers appearing again. The phone getting a call from Juiz, so implying that the game starts up again.
And if they did it again, I feel like they could do it a lot better this time and fix a lot of the problems, which are really just like plot holes and, wanting more development in characters and maybe a better ending that's a little less bull. But
Yeah.
I feel like they could actually
yes,
make
a
a much
better
better
ending.
show.
Yeah. Because it's one of those things where, like, the whole idea of saving Japan isn't something that can ever really realistically be accomplished, in the short term. Maybe if they fast forwarded like 50 years, it's like, okay, Takizawa's message, did make an impact.
Heck, if they brought in like the earthquake and the tsunami as elements of what needs to be done to repair Japan, like Japan's being crippled in a way. If that was part of a plot element, that could be interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess getting to overall thoughts about both the TV show and the movie, because I know there's some people out there who don't like the movies, and personally I really do,
No.
because
The movies are great.
I was not satisfied with the ending of the TV show. Like, it was a cool climax, but it didn't resolve any of the big questions that I had about the show, and the movies got most of those. They wrapped up most of the big plot points, like who Mr. Outside was, the mystery about the supporter, and the Takizawa's past, a lot of those questions.
Solved the mystery of the supporter, even though it was not plot relevant
Yeah.
in any way, shape, and or
Well,
form.
it basically
after,
turned out that the supporter was more of a threat than anything.
But then he never killed anybody after the first couple episodes. So
Well, he didn't kill anybody, but he erased their memories.
Whoop-de-doo. Didn't erase anybody else's memories. It didn't erase what's her name's memories after her Judy's got blown up. Wouldn't that count as losing? That's a lose condition.
You mean
Johnny Hunter.
Johnny Hunter?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, I guess it's a question of, I don't know if we saw her. No, God. Now I'm wondering if we saw her, because it's a question
No,
of just
I mean,
would
she
her
was
would her
paying
phone still
attention various
work?
points in the movie after her computer got blown up, and she was listening on her phone, and during the montage when minds were being wiped, she was there listening on her phone.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The supporter didn't get her, and she lost, right? That's a lose condition.
Yeah. Well, she didn't know, her balance didn't reach zero. Her Druise was destroyed. It's a little
how's
different
that
because
going?
Tsuji, the number 2, also had his Druise destroyed and his memory wasn't wiped.
Well, then what's the point of the supporter threat? Because he doesn't do anything. Like they just dropped that as a plot device.
The supporter was there to sort of force them into actually taking action,
I
because if
know,
you're
it was-
inactive for too long,
I know, but it was never a threat to any of them because it never came for anybody except for the doctor in the beginning. Then after that, they stopped suspecting
But-
anybody else of being a
well,
supporter.
no,
and it was
even
became
Really just stopped caring.
Mononobe did mention the supporter a couple times in the TV show. Like, they were constantly wondering who the supporter was. Like, are you the supporter?
But it never amounted to anything in the plot.
True, because it turned out that it was more of a
it was
phantom. It was
yeah.
a scapegoat, to cause them to doubt each other, and to force them into actually doing, trying to fulfill the game, trying to win the game.
I know, but it was such a huge plot point early on, and then it just turned
It
into
just drops.
nothing.
I feel like, I don't know, there's certain things I'm happy about and sad about with the ending, but I do I can't appreciate the fact that the creators didn't necessarily give us, the fans, what they wanted or what they expected. After watching the Madoka Rebellion film, I've sort of come to appreciate it when creators can pull that off and make it work, subverting your expectations. I think they sort of
That's
did
good,
that
yeah.
with Mr. Outside and the supporter, building them up to be these, sort of Mr. Outside to be this evil jerk, and the supporter to be this big threat. And then it turns out, the supporter's
Doesn't really exist.
more of a threat, phantom threat than anything. And Mr. Outside is a taxi driver old man, who's actually not such a bad dude.
See, but I'm fine with subverting expectations and not giving us what I want, because that's important. That's good, because then it's a good plot twist, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. But the problem with this is, and I really hated the ending to this. I was so in love with the second movie, all the way through. I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. Everything's finally coming together. All the pieces are just there, and they're about ready to, Watanabe and Takizawa, they're going to have this epic, who can screw over the other one the most kind of contest. And then I looked at the clock, and how much is left? I'm like, why is there only 10 minutes left of this movie? And then all their minds get wiped, and I'm like, where's the back and forth between them trying to machinate over the other one? Where's the the chess game, the who can manipulate everybody else the most before their money runs out and the supporter kills them? That doesn't come. It just ends.
So would you have preferred it to like for the second movie to be like end on a cliffhanger with the promise of like a third season?
Yeah, or a second season, a third
Or
movie, where
something.
it's just Mononobe v Takizawa, and who can out machinate the other one.
And more of the concept of like at one point the Johnny Hunter says like I've got my money on you. There are all these other players who aren't doing anything and they've still got money left. Like I want to see more of that, I've got my bets on this guy and them working together just
And
like,
then donating their money.
Takizawa said they really could have done at any point.
Right.
And then donating their money to either Wananobe or Takizawa, and then they just keep going until one of them runs out of money and the supporter comes and gets them. Because then that lends everybody, like all the plot devices kind of swirl together in this like climactic thing, except in the actual show, it just ends.
But the people who had their Juizes destroyed no longer had their money, so they couldn't really give it.
Well, they
to
couldn't do
They
it
have a
anymore.
zero balance and, Zero should come and kill him. Or Mr. or whatever his name
Or
was.
I guess technically they have money in their balance, but they can't access it because their Juiz is destroyed.
Well,
so
then
it's kind of a loophole.
Well,
I
those
guess.
people don't matter because then they're out of the game.
'Cause they're
But
both
everybody's
already
left in the
rich.
game has to either pick a side and go with it. Like, and then there was going to be like, I just wanted my, this to live up to its concept. Its concept was
There's
okay,
definitely some unfulfilled potential with this show. I definitely feel
yeah.
like that's the case.
and like I don't know. It just the ending comes out of nowhere. It's like, well, you all won. I'm gonna wipe your memories now. And I'm like, but where's my climactic? Who can screw over who the most? Where's my helping Japan? Why is just this ending? This shouldn't end. This doesn't make. It just ends.
Well, and it's not. To be fair, it's not just ends. Takizawa does do this thing, portrays himself as the villain again to all of Japan, and makes this speech, to try to cause this change, and the whole thing I talked about earlier, the Mononobe who hated the citizens basically, versus Takizawa who totally believed in them, the whole crowdsourcing thing again. There are some interesting things that are working in that
There are
ending.
interesting things, but
It seems more like lead up.
there was something else that I felt was supposed to happen. And then it just never happens. And the ending just kind of comes out of left field. You're like, wait, why is this ending?
I will admit one of the cooler moments I think in the show is where the Johnny Hunter and Takizawa are like dueling back and forth with their phones, like how she causes the accident on like the highway and he is like buying her a hotel. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And they didn't do much of that in the show.
They could have done that, but with Takizawa versus Wananobe trying to but on a countrywide scale and just have them go at it. Like, who can outdo the other one
And
first?
they sort of, there was Mononobe versus Takizawa was in the movies. It was just more of a like political
Passive.
battle.
But it was so passive, and I felt like there needed to be something else. Like, both of them had to make like one more big
conscious
move
effort.
against each other, like directly against each other, not passively through it against it. Because Takizawa didn't really do anything in the movie because he was just letting Juiz machinate him into being king of Japan. Like, that was
Right.
happening in the background. He didn't call her for anything.
Right. Well, but he did make the decision to steal his Juiz truck, steal Mononobe's, drive them together, to keep him from getting destroyed.
No, and that was cool and that was awesome. But like I said, there needed to be more of that. More of just direct conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist, and that just never comes because it's just so passive between the two. And then they finally have that sit down at the very end of Paradise Lost, and I'm like, oh my god, they have these very different ideologies, and they're gonna go at it, and they're gonna see which one's gonna win before the supporter comes and kills them, and then it just ends. Like, at that note, like, it's like, okay, we're almost there, and then the movie's over, and I'm like, and the game's over, and I'm like, what? But why? It just ends. Why do you would just end?
Yeah. I don't know. It definitely, like I said, it definitely subverts what you expect, and I suppose you can see that as a good thing or a bad thing. And I don't hate the ending in Paradise Lost. I actually I like parts of it, but I can't help but feel like with this series overall, there is some unfulfilled potential. Like that premise was so interesting, and they do some interesting things with it, and some things that I didn't really expect. Like I said, all the stuff about the youth of Japan, and like the modern day themes that they incorporate into the show, I think are really fascinating. But there was definitely some like Death Note-esque, mental battles that could have been going on back and forth that we didn't end up getting. So I don't know. Overall, for me, Eden of the East as a franchise is definitely something where like I'd be if they made like a second season, a third movie, I'd be very excited to see it, because I'd like to see, if there is a new game, like what that would be about, something that actually really finishes the story conclusively. And it's a good show to watch. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's out there who's interested in a plotty sort of show, these sort of death game intrigue kind of shows. It definitely has some problems with some of the characters, and it has some plot inconsistencies, and odd decisions that are made by the creators, that leave you feeling, not totally fulfilled at the end of it all. But I still overall enjoyed the series, I would say. Peter, what would you say your overall thoughts are?
I love the concept of it, but I feel like some of the tonal differences with the show, where, it can't decide if it's going to be hyper dark, where, they're fighting for their lives and, some assassin's going to hunt them down at any moment's notice if he feels they're not doing it right. And where, maybe one of them's going to hunt me down and try and force me to give them all of my money. Like, what if that happens? Or are we going to be sort of a love drama? Are we going to be a comedy? I mean, they never really committed to a single plot. And especially towards the end of the movie, they just give up on the dark concept at all. Like, it becomes entirely political, and they give up on that whole, there's a real life and death threat going on here, and I'm fighting for my life. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, and I really would have loved to see more of the characters' thoughts and goals and plans. Because to me, this suited a very Ocean's 11-esque, heist movie. You see the plan, some things are hidden from you, but you have an idea of what the characters are doing, and you feel like you're part of this, grand scheme to, make a real difference in something.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Andrew, what would you say overall?
Overall, like I said, love the concept. It was great, great premise. The Takizawa Suki romance was really good. Really, Saki. Sorry. Was really well done. I don't know. The show, I was watching it and I couldn't help but feeling like something was missing. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I felt like there was something missing. Maybe I guess I didn't feel like the actual plot lived up to the premise that it created, because the premise was awesome. Mm-hmm. The first movie was really just an overly long episode where they just kind of ran around in circles for a little bit. Like, they ran around in circles while the stage crew was setting up the stage for the second movie over there in the back.
There was still a lot of interesting political stuff going on in that movie. And you had the cool end with the missiles.
Everything that happened in the first movie could have just as easily happened in 2 episodes of the show, or the beginning half hour of the second movie. I mean, like I said, it's just, he wiped his memory again, and I never understood why he did that. Because, like you said, you just don't understand what he's thinking. Why is he doing the things that he's doing? Right. He's so passive that I don't get a sense of, his motivation for, half the things he does.
Yeah, which is both a flaw and an interesting thing in that it lends a lot of unpredictability to your main character, so it's it makes it harder to figure out what's going to happen next in the show, because your character you're not seeing into the protagonist's mind, so you don't really know what he's going to do next, what his crazy plan is going to be.
That started to bother. At first that's cool, and then that starts to bother me, because I'm why are you doing the things that you're doing? This doesn't make any sense.
I want to understand who you are as a person, but you're not really that much of a person.
You're not.
Well, because he keeps erasing his memories.
And then the second movie comes along, and they start using everything that they've had so far, and I'm oh my god, this is awesome, this is great. I was so in love with the second movie up until the last 10 minutes before the credits, where they just throw all that out the window, and I'm but where's my interesting climactic plot thing? And then it's just no, I'm not really interested in doing that, because I wanted to subvert your expectations. But you're not doing that in a way that I thought was interesting. You're doing that in a way that I find boring and contrived. And
anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Bothered me.
I can definitely see that argument. I sort of the one way I can sort of justify the ending, I suppose, is how realistically, what was another way that Takizawa could have saved Japan, through whatever it was he was going to do. I feel like it sort of makes sense that Takizawa comes up with this really oddball, crazy, but interesting way of, of solving the problem, a way that people wouldn't expect, that really doesn't solve the problem more than putting Japan on the path towards eventually solving the problem.
Which is fine, but like at the same time, it's like, well, why are you doing these? Like, it goes back to the issues. We don't really understand who he is or why he does half the things he does. So he just, like, you don't know what he could have done to fix everything, to win.
When it comes down to it, what he could have done, like, you ask what he could have done, like, well, that's the writer's job to think of something. Like,
Well,
that's
not
my job as the viewer. My job is to enjoy the show and then buy it if I like it enough.
The writer obviously knows more about Takizawa than he lets us know. So why he just
never tells us.
he never tells us, and so he could have done something that would have been like beaten Watanabe in probably a really cool and interesting and clever way in like a third movie or another season of the show.
He clearly has the skill as a writer. Like, he's not a bad writer.
He just throws all that away, and I don't know if that was because they said that we're not going to make. He's like, can I have another movie? No, we're not going to make another movie for you. You have to end it here. And he's just like, well, now I'm going to write this ending because cop out.
Yeah, I would be interested to look that up to see, like, does he view Paradise Lost like as the ending? There's not going to be any more, or is he interested in making more? Which I think is sort of at least implied by the very end. With the phone turning back on again. Like, there's definitely the hint of something more to come.
I wonder if he set that up. Like, okay, he's like, I'm gonna make the second movie, and then the production company's like, no, we're not going to let you make a third movie because that's going to cost a lot of money and the show's not doing super, super well. And he's like, fine, whatever. So cop-out ending because I can't write the ending I want to write. But then he adds that thing in the credits in case, someday somebody gives him the green light so that there is
Maybe
an ending,
cult
but there's
following
also
thing.
enough left over.
I don't know for sure. I don't think Eden of the East wasn't like a smash hit or anything like that, but it was reasonably successful, I think. That's why they made a TV show and immediately afterwards these two movies.
But like,
Oh, by the way, I feel bad for the people who had to watch the show and then wait for both of the movies because no, I got to just watch all of it in a row, and that was just awesome. But having to watch like episode by episode, and then you get that ending that's not really satisfying, and then you get the next movie which is just 2 episodes, and then you get the last movie. I would have been pissed. Like, I would have been angry.
I used to, and I wonder if that like contributed. Like, I wonder if people fell off watching it, but I don't know how successful it was.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean,
who knows?
I'm just saying, like, I wonder if that's what happened, and that's why we got the ending we got. But it's like the ending of the first season of Korra, where it just kind of like it has that very unsatisfying conclusion that we all complained about because they didn't know if they were going to get a second season to mess with all that stuff. So they wanted just to end it, and this was like
similar to
their
that.
way of that. Like, no, that way it ends, but I can't do the thing I wanted to do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know. In looking online, Eden of the East is a little, like, controversial in that regard. Like, a lot of people don't like the ending of the movie, feeling that it's incomplete. And it can definitely be read that way. I think there are some good, some interesting elements that I like about how the Paradise Lost subverts things. That's why I own the movie. But it definitely... unfulfilled potential is definitely an issue with this show, that anyone should be prepared for going into it, I think.
If you like this show, I recommend the visual novel games 999 and Virtue's Last Reward.
You're just selling
this
those
is
no matter
just
what.
this game. It's just this show,
No, it's
except with better plot and
No, it's
darker.
not.
And it's a lot of fun.
No, it's not this game. It is not anywhere close to this game. It's more Saw and just people shoved in a room, not told to save a country, but to save themselves. It's just, you're just trying to drum up support for that game so you get your third one.
Yes, I am. Shut up.
We don't have enough listeners for that.
No, we do not.
Can dream.
All right. So if you out there enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at techheads@avwproductions.com. You can follow us on Twitter at techheadsou, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on iTunes. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. We're techheads, no longer AVW Media. We've got a blog at techheads.me. We're pretty awesome. Next week's podcast is going to be about The Wind Rises, since we all went and saw that at the Athena, and a film I've been wanting to do for a while, 5 centimeters per second, the Makoto Shinkai collection of short films. So that'll be a fun one to talk about, and hopefully the week after that will be Kill a Kill, and hopefully we'll be talking about how awesome it is. So we will see you guys next week when we're back for Shred Cels episode 54.
This product is copyright AVW Productions 2000.